Hi.
Hello.
Oh, hi there. Right, let's see if I could actually get this. I hear somebody's background music.
Me, I'm playing it on purpose.
Ah, okay.
Love it. Connected. Great. Woo.
Yeah, I don't know why your emails are registered as panelists, but maybe you are using different emails for Zoom. So it should have. I've been sitting here by myself for the past 10 minutes.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. No, I think it's to do with. Actually, we should ask Anish and Marta why, but I think it's to do with synchronizing when somebody logs into the fact that it's you're meant to be joining. It's finding each other. They obviously haven't used the optimized technology to find quickly. Because I tried to join a couple of times, waited a couple of minutes, and this is the same link, joined again, and now it worked. So.
Oh, no, that wasn't because of that. Because this is a webinar, I had not started it, and it only lets panelists in.
Ah.
And I did register all of you as panelists, but it didn't let you in. So
anyway,
I think it should let you into a waiting room. That's how I think it should happen, but I don't know how.
Yeah, anyway.
With the webinars, it's not a waiting room, it's different, but I mean, we're figuring it out as we go. And
Okay.
Fortunately, we live in a world where people are more understanding and flexible.
Yeah. And I've just seen a comment from Jeff Hancock saying this is why Teams is better than Zoom. Jeff, you and I have seen completely eye to eye on everything except this.
Oh, I can tell you, Team is one of the most, very interesting pieces of software.
Interesting. That was the most diplomatic thing you have said in your life, Anish. That's brilliant. I love that. Oh, fantastic. Oh, this is great. I've been looking forward to this one, actually. Now, let's have a look. Jeff just said it used to suck. Actually, you're so right. We should always keep trying these things. They've got enough money to improve it, right? So you never know. We're good. So let me see. Are we all present? No, not yet.
Yes. So, but in the meantime, I could just kind of do a recap of what we've been doing today and kick the session off. Thank you, everyone.
Marta just said, she texted me just a sec, she's running over something and she'll join us.
Okay. So this is, thank you for joining us. This is currently streaming live on YouTube, but after the session, we're gonna crop this beginning parts to make sure that we have a proper kickoff and beginning. So welcome everyone who's in the audience with us today. We're really excited about this session too. Once Marta is joining us right now. Oh, it's perfect. And
Marta's in the attendees list.
She's here in the panel.
Maybe she.
No, I know.
She's come up. Hello.
Hello. Sorry. Thank you so much. As you all get set up, I'm just gonna welcome everyone. This is day 3 of the virtual EdenBase Basecamp week that we are running for our top 20 semi-finalists. But we also carefully curated content sessions, and some of these, like this one, is open to the wider EdenBase network and community, because these are some of the areas that we're really that are really critical and at the heart of the EdenBase philosophy and our values. And that's why we thought this would be a great panel for us to kind of share where our mind is, and also learn from the experience of people who've been through this and who are experts in their fields. So with that said, I think Eric, if you're ready, and if Marta and Anish, if everyone is set up with their audios, videos, everything, I'm going to hand it off to you, Eric.
Great, thank you very much. So the first rule of technology is that no one agrees. What I have noticed in technology is that there are always going to be differing approaches. But the very important thing is that we are aware of all those approaches and we discuss those approaches. And one of the things that we hope to help you with at EdenBase is your technology. If we are going to do a technology transformation with your company, if we're going to invest in you and help you with a technology transformation to adopt or embrace frontier technology, we want to help you think that through, help you get the best advice, and have access to terrific talent around this. And 2 titans of tech have joined us here today, which is Marta and Anish. And so we decided to do the tech transformation panel just as a discussion. You will find that I'm going to ask them for some examples and questions about their approach to technology. And as they've as Daniel has said, they've seen quite a lot of this, and also in some cases supported ecosystems of tech as well, and so have a view on how others have done this. But I'm going to start though this session with asking Daniel just to tell us a little bit about actually the genesis and the philosophy of EdenBase was something called blockchain smokers. They're slightly coolly named blockchain smokers, and you're going to have to say why, because it wasn't about smoking, why it was called blockchain smokers. But what was the original premise of blockchain smokers, and then talk a little bit about why we've transformed it into the EdenBase model and what we hope to achieve with it.
Okay, well, a bit of background. I mean, the people here know, but I'll say it again. You know, I've been in disruptive tech for a really long time. I mean, that's an advantage of being old. And I started in derivative trading technology back in the early 90s when it was actually new. As everybody knows, I had to stop a bank being shut down by the banking committee in the US, which was change. And, you know, I saw how people react to change from the outside and from the inside. And I realized it's very difficult. When I got into blockchain and new technologies like this in about 2016, and I realized it was disruptive, you know, and disruption is very difficult to create market adoption with. I think that's the key thing, and it's very lucky whether you do it or not. So when in 2016, I had this theory about how you create good disruptive tech. And it came from all this experience. I used to advise the EU on disruption and innovation, etc. So I've had a lot of thinking about it. Some of my companies have been disruptive, and Anish and I, back in late 2016, early 2017, with Barry, who's another one of the judges, all got together, and we were thinking about how you do this best. And we came up with this model of finding really good people that understand their industries, who understand what their industries need to change. And they can deliver technology that's not scary to their customer. Disruptive technology that requires a lot of change is often scary to people. So we tried to create this model that did that. And this is the result of it, EdenBase at the end. But we came up with the name Blockchain Smokers, funnily enough, because Anish, I, and Barry were all in Berlin, and we were all on different panels talking about different subjects, and we didn't have a name yet. And my daughter, Nikki, who's on the call here, used to really love the band Chainsmokers. And so while I was there, in fact, it was the day before Chainsmokers came up, and I thought blockchain smokers. And I said it as a joke to Anish, Barry, and both of them said, yeah, okay. And so we went with that. And wherever I went for the next 6 months, everyone, and this was 2017 when it was cool to be in ICOs, etc. Everyone said that's the coolest name out there. So that's how it happened. The EdenBase, just to finish on EdenBase, when we met in 2019, and I had tested the blockchain smokers model on the Atari project, I realized the missing element was the ecosystem, was this collaboration of so many people. I mean, we were always slightly collaborative, but this bringing everybody together with different views, different skills, putting it all together, that's how you create really good disruption and market adoption. So that's mine.
Brilliant. And I like that thing that you said, different views, and we challenge knowledge, and from that, better decisions are made also. So that's an incredibly important part of it. I'd like to turn to Marta first. Marta, I heard somebody describe you, I don't know if you heard of the queen of tech ecosystems, and I don't know if you accept that description, but even if you don't, I think it's brilliant. And so what I'd like you to do, though, is start off with an introduction to yourself, your background, and some of the things you've been doing recently, and also what you're doing at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I'm claiming that. I'm gonna just write it on a Bitcoin blockchain or something. And
yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm a queen of ecosystem. As a matter of fact, I am currently with Balancer Labs, and I am holding a position of community Induna. Induna is an African name for a person who brings the community together and prepares them for a war and helps them fighting. So, I am trying to lead the community. I really don't like the title head of community, just because I strongly believe, and that will tell you something about what I think about ecosystems and building ecosystems. I don't like the concept of being a leader or a head of a group of volunteers and people that are passionate about it. It's something that my ex-boss, Brian Bellendorf, liked to say, is that in open source, there are no pilots, there are only air traffic controllers. And that's how I think about my role whenever I join a community or an ecosystem, is to help them grow and become better, smarter, and work together and make sure that everybody plays nice, rather than to tell people what to do.
Right.
Ecosystem building is not about telling people what to do. That's not an ecosystem, and that's not in the spirit of blockchain in general. Obviously, we don't have our whatever leaders or judges or whatever. My experience is actually, my background is in security and privacy. I have a PhD from University of Berlin in that, although I went from being a pretty proper hacker and doing a bunch of fun things to understanding that actually systems are very easy to break. It's much harder to build systems that are secure. And what's even harder is to build systems that are easy to use, and thus users do not break them. One of the most common things that happen is obviously it's the user that does something that the architect didn't think of, and that's where the system breaks. So I went through a very hardcore tech to a much more kind of human-centric, user-centric approach, which is still a passion of mine. That's also kind of why I love being in this space, because it's still very hard to use and very easy to break by that. And then I was a security architect at Blockstream, which is a Bitcoin company. Went to the permissioned blockchain space, the dark side, if you will, and where was with Hyperledger as a director of ecosystem. And now I'm with Balancer Labs, which is a DeFi startup.
So you see, I can't tell whether you're a decentralist or a centralist or a technologist.
I'm a humanist.
You were a humanist. That was the most brilliant answer. Thank you, Marta. Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Anish, welcome. Obviously, we've spoken a couple of times before, but every time you pretty much blow my mind. So I'd like you to please, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about your background. Now, the thing is, you have done so much, you're going to have to do it quite quickly, because otherwise we could be on it for a while. So go for it.
So you want a blockchain version or a technology version?
Yeah, you see, here we go. Just go for it. Just go for it. Start with the most recent and work backwards. I'll tell you when to stop.
Okay. So blockchain-wise, early advisor to Ripple, one of the original reviewers of Orange Paper, have designed half a dozen layer 1 protocols of blockchains. I've done design of more than a dozen dApps, working on some well-known protocols, 3 in top 10, top 100, 2 in top 10. Currently working on Boson, Panther, and still advising Ocean.
In your spare time? Okay.
Yes, okay. And other things include, I've done 20 years in security and cryptography. I've worked in various labs, including Microsoft Research, wrote up all the early BS around cloud security. I'm one of the authors of the Cloud Security Alliance Guide, side of the ISO committee. I mean, it depends on what you want. Like I've worked on all the way from cloud to blockchain and cryptography and privacy. A couple of my papers are on Microsoft Research homepage. That's
so let me ask you the question then, not that it's massively relevant, but just as an aside, would you consider yourself a person that believes in decentralization in technology?
Well, it's an interesting question. It depends for the use case. Not all things, it's a very simple answer. It's an information theoretic impossibility. Okay, so a society can only be coherent as long as it has the ability to communicate. And the channel bandwidth constraints how you could hold together a community. So essentially, if I can't communicate to you, and the information that's required to communicate to you, the rules that are required to communicate to you, so we can hold together society is too high, and the language can't support, or the channel can't support, the society will collapse. So that's how I would describe it.
It depends is the answer, I guess. Marta, back to you. Now, the way I look at it is you've been responsible for some of the most impactful tech ecosystems, and having debated with your boss previously about blockchain and territoriality, but that's another question we'll come to another time. What do you think for our cohort, for the audience? What are the key things that companies contemplating a technology change, a technology transformation should consider before they do this?
Well, I think first and foremost, you really need a blockchain. It's computationally very heavy. It's hard to build in a good and secure and usable way. It's expensive as well. And it's very different to build out a POC than to build out a product. And that's something that even yesterday I had a call with a friend who started a ticketing solution and sounded like, blockchain is the right thing. And then was saying, well, actually, we are 2 years in, we are using a certain blockchain as a service platform. We are paying them more than we can ever earn. And actually, we don't really need a consensus because all the participants are playing nice. We need an archivist service. And so, I was like, well, maybe you should consider not having a blockchain or having a very, very non-blockchain kind of distributed solution. So I think these are the questions that I would always ask myself first. And then when going into the digital transformation, I would assess the whole industry. A common issue with companies, young companies that come into a space is usually these are people who see a problem and want to solve the problem and forget that these problems exist for a reason and are unsolved for a reason. That reason quite often being regulation, just the industry itself. Some industries love their inefficiencies and they don't want to be disrupted. They don't want to be improved. So you're then building or fighting two battles. You're fighting a battle of introducing a new product to the market that is already crowded, and you're trying to battle mindsets that are very hard to change.
Okay, just in case anybody's wondering, Marta is not just bobbing and weaving around, she's actually on the treadmill. I don't think I've ever been on a call where you've not been on the treadmill.
No.
I think that I need to start thinking about doing that as well.
Well, you can come and we can have a walk or take a walk.
I think we should have them at EdenBase, don't you think? It's a great idea. We should go for a walk and have them at EdenBase. What a brilliant idea. Good. See, already contributing brilliant ideas to the ecosystem. I love it. So, Anish, I wanted to ask you a bit more about the blockchain smokers model, because even though the idea and the concept to transform a company's fortunes and opportunity using technology sounds like a good idea, it also comes with risk. So what do you look for in terms of ingredients for success when you consider a technology transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know in my description of what I've done, I haven't mentioned, I did like 7 years of strategy consulting, and I used to look after the cloud strategy for some very well-known entities. So, you look at a normal, business model, I kind of see, is there some chance that scaling it up in an economic sense? This very much applies to blockchain. There's this whole area, what we call cryptoeconomics, which actually looks at this, especially for building protocols, which is what I spend the most amount of time these days. So you literally look at it and go in a so-called interaction perspective, say, okay, is it going to add real value in whatever transaction that's happening? And is there an upside for everybody in this game? That's like the first thing I think. And then I look at, okay, if it's just a game where it is going to be like a platforming game, double-sided game, as in like, a sell-a-buy kind of thing. And what does an equilibrium look like? And are the technologies that we are actually bringing into this game going to help us defend ourselves in case an adversary turns up with equal or less than equal amount of data or other resources? That's how I think about it.
Interesting. And actually, as you did quite a lot of cloud strategy work, I'd like to ask you this question as well. I consider some of the cloud opportunities that I've seen quite dangerous for young companies to contemplate. And my own experience of this is that at the time that I built, Martin, Martin Walker, the technologist, at the time that we built our previous company, it was a fintech company before it was called fintech. There was no data center to go to. There was no cloud we could rent rack space in or power or servers or storage or anything like that. We had to raise money from venture capitalists to build it and deploy it. But the thing that he did, which was really valuable for me, was help me calculate what my COGS was, my cost of goods being sold. And so he would calculate the iteration count and how much resource I need in order to stand up a service and then sell it. Because I had loads of brilliant ideas, but half of them were never going to make money because the cost of the technology would just be impossible, especially then. Actually, it's very funny. Then we raised $43 million to build the business. Now we could do it with $3 million. So it's quite a big difference. But with cloud and cloud strategies, is that something that startups, the companies on this course, should consider? And how should they go about calculating it? Because all the cloud companies give them loads of cloud free to start with. And then what happens then?
Okay, so I'm going to say a few things just to give some historical basis and some analysis. So Andrew Jesse is actually going to be the next replacement for Jeff. In fact, I met him in 2007 in a pub in London. Okay.
Andrew Jesse, sorry, which company?
Oh, Amazon Web Services, Amazon in fact. Okay.
Right.
So in 2000 Feb, I got my first Amazon account, and we only had an SSH and nothing else, and ran on Linux. And I had to run Kimu to run Windows instances on top of it. So the way all these ecosystems work is kind of enticing people to change their behavior, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is like, renting cars, right? So this is like a very simple explanation I normally say to people is like, you have a particular profile. If you rent cars, it makes sense for you. In certain instances, buying your own car is optimal for you. And this very much applies to workloads. And the thing one needs to understand is the law of averages or law of large numbers. If you are in the middle of a bell curve, you will be doing very well. So you have a bell curve distribution of all workloads on a cloud. And if you are in the middle of this, it works very well for you. If you ever go about either one sigma on either left or right of it, you are forced to actually pay a lot more. And that's why Netflix had to go out. All the people that actually have workloads that are slightly different from the average workload that's on the cloud, you're not going to be getting any benefit. So the real benefit is like understanding what is your workload. If your workload is going to be in a very nice shape that you can actually get, essentially all Amazon is doing is like, smoothing a curve. So Amazon's real problem was the first time, I forgot the name of the guy. So I met the guy who's like pretty deeply involved in the cloud architectures in that sense. They had a PubSub meltdown in 2004. So he came to Microsoft Research and gave a talk about it. And then they realized what was happening and the fixing of that problem. So Amazon's problem is like September, October, they peak, okay? And the peak continues till December, Jan, it just goes off. And then, you don't have any use of it, any of this hardware, right? So what are you going to do? You have a massive capex, and now the opex for all of this is negative. Can I do an arbitrage in that sense? Okay, can I actually have a way by which I can generate some revenue out of this thing? So the thing they worked out is like, if they actually size it up into an average workload that anybody could actually consume and charge them a bunch of money, which is lower than what it will cost them to do, there is a marketplace to do. And what you need to understand as a startup is like, what is my workload? Yeah. So if you're going to stand up a deep learning pipeline, I would tell you, you're far better off going and buying a top-end, now you can't get GPUs, but a top-end GPU than trying to stand up GPUs on Amazon Web Services and do deep learning pipelines. Absolutely.
That's very interesting. Wow, that's a nugget for this crowd, isn't it? Because there's a lot of them looking to do that. So actually, I'm going to come back to you on that, if I may.
Sure.
Can you please say that one? Because I need to ask you more questions about that, because a lot of the companies that we're talking to are either using AI or ML in particular, and then or considering it. But I just want to jump back to Marta and ask you a bit more actually about approaches to security, Marta, if I can. I will put my hand up and say that I have been involved in startups where we've stood up the business quickly and put things out on test nets that are not exactly the most secure. And so, just to try things and test things. But the problem is they often become an issue. At what stage should the companies be thinking about security? And how can we help them think about that? Or what should their approach be?
Day zero, like before you even
day zero.
Before you find your co-founders, start thinking about security. And I'm kind of joking, not joking, because I mean, depending on what you're doing, obviously there are places where you can kind of say, well, nobody will really care or whatever. But most cases, you will be dealing with information and sensitive data of your clients, and at some point, if you are hoping to be successful, you should also be hoping that you'll be a target for attackers, because that's the measure of success. If people want
that's so true,
they will. So, and it's much harder to retrofit security. I mean, I've been working with Thales, which is this big cybersecurity company, aerospace cybersecurity company. They produce hardware security modules. And I've always had the discussion with them because people are like, unless it's like a government that knows that from the very beginning to build it secure, they've been working with so many companies that come to them and be like, oh, we built this whole thing and now it's all kind of running. So let us just stick a hardware security module into HSM to our thing and it will become secure. And it's not like that. You can't just put something in. You can't say, oh, we're going to use blockchain. And because of that, the data will be secure. It will be immutable. But in some ways, it will be much more insecure. And the other thing that I would say in terms of security that is very important is to remember what the security implications using technology brings. What I mean by that is, if you build, like, the more complicated the system, more potential for bugs, issues, right, and attack vectors. So on one hand, sure, you're adding, your artificial intelligence, making your system better in some way. Maybe you're even using that AI to do some kind of system analysis and figuring out if someone broke your system or not. But at the same time, you're bringing more complicated technology that is potentially exploitable. That's a thing. And looking outside of the box and thinking, even in my company, bless them, they had a whole briefing on security for all of the dev team, because we've had some issues in terms of someone was trying to attack us. So the whole dev team was briefed on how to store the keys and how to store the password, but none of the marketing people, none of the creative people, nobody talked to them. And if I was an attacker, I would of course go to the marketing and creative people, because they have no clue about it. Like, devs have at least some sense for it. So I think that these are the main topics for me.
So that's a cultural approach as well. I write that one, a cultural approach. You're going to find these notes, cultural approach. Sorry, I'm just making notes as I remember, otherwise I don't do it. So the other question I wanted to ask you while I have you is, we've had so much debate on public and private blockchains, public blockchains and private DLTs. What are the best use cases for both?
Public blockchains are brilliant for building cryptocurrencies, so with permissionless public blockchains, specifically with Ethereum, the issues that are very clear are gas prices, right? And while Bitcoin at least is a blockchain that was built purposefully only for storing Bitcoin, and if someone wants to claim their name on it, that's great, but that wasn't the purpose of having Bitcoin. Ethereum kind of promises to be this universal machine, universal computer. And so it is an issue right now where people are using it for storing data, storing information, and the costs of it are just incredible. It's like $60, $120 to make a transaction on Ethereum, and it doesn't matter if it's in millions or if it's a 1 byte of data. It's just that. So I think permissionless blockchains are great if we're talking cryptocurrency, tokens, whatever you want to call it, just financial instruments. Anything else, I would always consider having some flavor of permission blockchain, because if you are doing something in a setting where you can assume goodwill in the actors, like it's not an environment which will be inherently just attacked constantly, can have a permission space, in my opinion. Now, is it a super permission thing like a Hyperledger Fabric, where basically you need to trust everyone? Or is it something much more kind of open-ended, like if you have a bigger supply chain or data storage and you're using something like Quorum or Betsu or something like that? That's a whole different story how you do it.
Well, the good news for our wonderful cohort is that you're part of the EdenBase family, so we can always ping you a message and ask. So actually, part of the point of this is interactivity, right? So if you're in the audience and you have a question, you're thinking about your own platform, that's part of the benefit of this. And I see we've had one already. So Rob Cousins has pinged a note saying, thanks for the talk. We'd love to hear some more on Anish's point regarding using a local GPU rather than AWS when it comes to deep learning. What's behind that? Thanks. So Anish, go for it. What's behind that?
Okay, there are lots of reasons behind it. The first and foremost is the way that cloud computing models are created. So cloud computing model typically implies they charge you for your I/O. So they charge you for your storage. And not only do they charge you for your GPU. So if you're thinking of a deep learning pipeline, you're definitely going to, unless the data is already on the cloud, and unless the I/O is going to be cheap. If you were to just think of just the GPU alone, let's think about it in very simple terms. A typical GPU instance will be like $8 or over, whatever that is, right? The last time I checked. And even then you have constraints on how many you can have and things of that sort. And you be on a queue. So if you are building a pipeline and you want to build something and you want to deliver it on time, your opportunity cost is much higher in that sense. So, you literally, even if you were to able to get some of this, the time it takes for you to get your pipeline, get all the things, get your GPU allocated, that's a cost. And secondly, the real cost of doing the compute, right? So I think we ran a pipeline for a few hours and it was like a $300+, $300, $400. And to me, that was literally, there is no point in having this. We will just buy a Titan and we will run a pipeline on top of it because we needed some GPU that has more than 8 gigs of memory in a VRAM, right? So it's like a $2,000 plus in that sense. But if you were somebody and you were going to run models, you don't normally run one model. You run models iteratively multiple times. And if you run a model, especially a deep learning model, it's like a good number of hours. When you integrate that and ignoring the other facts, which I said, the fact that you need to pay for I/O, the fact that you need to pay for storage, okay, assuming all those are being discounted, even this alone is so big that it makes a lot of sense for you to just get a GPU.
Okay, well, to continue that question, we've actually had a comment, something that we should consider about from Jeff in the chat, which is when you're doing that, you've got to think about GPUs in the UK right now, the resale value. You can't buy anything in the UK due to mining. Resale value should be considered for premium items. Not to mention, it's a great tax write-off for the business. I love that we're having this discussion.
It's awesome. I was about to say that, but I wasn't sure I should say this. So the second part of this argument is like, if you think about it in a very economic terms, or you could think of your GPU pipeline doing your deep learning deep learning stuff, say 20% of the time or 80% of the time. The rest of the time, you could, given the price of ETH, and for the next 2 years, without a shadow of a doubt, if you could get a GPU, you will absolutely get more money. And for that reason alone.
So that's interesting. So you're saying that a GPU pipeline is an investment as well?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yes, without a shadow of a doubt at this point in time.
I love that.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys, you're making me think, Daniel, we should be thinking about setting up our own instance GPU that our cohort and our companies have access to, because number one, it's an investment for us, and number two, it's a fantastic utility for our companies as well. So thank you guys for that amazing suggestion, and you heard it right here. I don't know if we'll do it, but we're certainly going to look into this.
I think unless Amazon is going to give you, this is the thing we need to understand about Amazon's game, right? Amazon's game is the following. Amazon's game is to completely take over the ecosystem systematically. So go back, look at history, look at posts, look at all the services that were offered on Amazon day one. Marta might probably recognize the whole INAM stack was actually, and almost all the security stack were provided by third party. Okay, it was third party providers that provided it. And what Amazon did was they actually recognized this value for that. They will produce it internally and sell it as a cost at which the competitors can't compete. And that's actually a capturing mechanism. You are being held a hostage once you enter that ecosystem. So, you need to think about it that way as well. Like, what is Amazon's game? If Amazon is going to enter your ecosystem, what are your odds of actually competing with them? So, you need to understand that game as well. It's like there's an economic game, that's this so-called business game. And then there's this meta game that Amazon plays.
Amazing. Daniel, when you built your tech company, which was like in DRM revenue assurance for DRM and security for some of the biggest software companies, I think you had people like Microsoft and people distributing games and software. Was your technology a cloud solution then, or did you have to build it yourselves on your own servers?
we built it all ourselves on our own servers. I mean, but we did something very different. We worked in the days when, you know, we might be having to deal with, in South Africa, a dial-up modem of 56K.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
you know, it didn't matter. So we turned the whole model on its head. What we did is we realized that the delivery of the actual package itself was very expensive. And so to do it, and time consuming. So we only wanted to do it once. So the whole mechanism we came up with is we delivered everything once locally, and then we used license keys as the mechanism for release, because the license key was a K or 2K or 3K. So you could, even to South Africa, you could do it in 14 seconds. And that was the way that we resolved all the problems. So yeah, we would have been very cloud happy because we took advantage of tiny little IOs and data.
Well, I would have been very cloud happy if there was a cloud that we wanted.
No cloud.
But there, not only was there no cloud, there was no specific CTI cloud. There was no Twilio. There was nothing like that at the time. And actually the lesson that Anish said, make sure you're in the middle of the bell curve, you're like in the sweet spot for their offering, so you're not a premium other side of it. I think it's terrific advice as our companies think about it. Marta, what do you think are some of the best examples or a good example of a technology implementation that you've seen?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, blockchain technology specifically, or any technology?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, it doesn't have to be blockchain, but we are looking for good examples of just the right amount of technology to solve a problem that made a huge difference, I suppose, is an interesting thing to consider.
Sure.
Or in the ecosystem that you were working in before, were there any players solving problems well with the tech?
So I actually am a pretty big fan of the stuff that Balancer is doing right now. I think it's neat, but it's very different and very far away from, in a way, what EdenBase is looking for. So I'm going to skip that. Good ones. The issue with a lot of those things is that they are still kind of very early stages,
yeah,
to be honest. And so while I might say, oh, I think that this is a good idea, I also worry sometimes that it's over-engineered. But having said all of that, I like what Circular is doing. Circular is a British company. They build out an ecosystem for tracking rare metal and certification of rare metal or rare
rare earth.
The earth thingies, whatever you call them. Sorry,
what do they call them? Rare earth materials, anyway. Yeah.
So,
very interesting. So tracking and certification of rare earth materials.
Yeah, so to prove that it doesn't come from war zones or, you know, it's fair trade and whatever else. But also they extended that, and their actual first use case was cradle to grave of batteries for cars.
Right.
So because these actually use all of those rare earth materials, like titanium and forget the second one, they were able to track each battery from the very beginning when it becomes just the pieces of it to the moment when they are recycled, and the car companies have to prove that that they have recycled the batteries. I also like not only what they're doing because it's a cool idea and it's a very good usage of blockchain, but I also like how they build their ecosystem, which is, and I think that's probably even a better answer to your question, is instead of building out a consortium as most people do. So, you know, there is a company called Surge, they're doing eyewear tracking. So it's a supply chain of eyewear from all the glamorous brands like Boss and Chanel and so on, where they just took every single player in that supply chain, from the plastic producer to the designer to the actual manufacturer, and they tried to convince everyone to participate in the blockchain. That just doesn't work. What Circular did was they signed contracts with Daimler, with Volvo, and said, you know, this is a great idea. And then Volvo went to their suppliers and said, if you want to be our suppliers, you have to join this thing. And then those suppliers went to their suppliers and said the same thing. And the way that they created the ecosystem, while the information stays confidential, if they design a feature for Volvo, they release the same feature to Daimler and the other way. So their clients constantly get value of participating in this whole thing, which is another, I think, very valuable lesson to be learned. I have another one, but being mindful of time, I'm not going to blurb about it.
Yeah, I probably need to check in with Gigi. I was diving into this conversation too much. Have I run over? Is it about right? What, Gigi?
I think I mean, the conversation is going great. I can see our companies are really excited because we do have companies that are really interested in this type of technology. We do have a few more minutes if you want to kind of get like the last thoughts.
Yeah, I'd like to move to, if I can, predictions. So, I mean, I've just finished with Marta, so maybe think about a prediction, technology-related prediction. It could be around, you know, the ESGs in technology and how the world will look at it. It might be an interesting one to consider. But Anish, how about you? Do you have any predictions, particularly thinking about AI, ML, think about GPT-3 coming out and the, you know, where these become more general purpose, these kind of technologies. What do you predict that the democratization of frontier technologies means to startups or to organizations like us investing in them?
I think I generally would refer to one of the papers that came out of Google called The Unusual Effectiveness of Data. And that clearly indicates where things are going. Effectively.
What's the title again, Anish?
The Unusual Effectiveness of Data.
Nikki, on it straight away, looking for it, finding it, maybe post the link.
Yeah, so there are 3 things that you require if you are in the machine learning space, and more in the deep learning space. So that's humans to actually build the models, hardware to run the thing, and data. Data is the key, that's a moat. So the question is, how do people get the data? So like progress in machine learning requires data. And that you can actually use GAN to get synthetic data, but you know, the real drive essentially still is the raw data. And what raw data essentially means is like, you know, people are losing privacy, meaning as in like, you can divide the world into 2 halves. One half is like the part of the world, like China and other places where they really don't have the constructive privacy, all the data is theirs. And that is effectively very, very useful. And that is this narrative that Marta was kind of alluding to, this AI versus AI kind of game, where in the whole cyber warfare, you could think of it as like, you know, you have nation states who are trying to attack another nation state. Defending essentially is like a bunch of machine learning algorithms trying to, you know, detect attacks happening. And attacking is again like a bunch of algorithms like GANs who would actually create new attacks and deploy. So it's more a case of world being boiled down to how I would describe as a constraint optimization problems, where every country in the world thinks their real advantage in economic, political, and military strategy boils down to their ability to do, you know, machine learning in one sense or the other. So what does that imply? There will be significant improvements in machine learning hardware in that sense. It's like already D-Wave and other people are being used by Google and others to do the so-called quantum machine learning space. And there are, you know, improvements in the deep learning pipeline happening that way. So I expect a lot of those changes to happen. And at the same time, I expect this real strife between privacy world and privacy-less world to become more relevant.
Because, interesting.
Yeah, like, you know, in a game where getting the most optimal function and pricing the gain you have. So, you know, imagine you have product A and product B, and you can actually tailor the product to the closest, you know, the closest consumer. And can you do differential pricing for that? And why doing the differential pricing? If you discover the value of your machine learning optimization, that kind of drives how much you are willing to, what extent you are willing to go to get the data and do the machine learning thing, right? So this is going to really drive, and then this is literally going to be shaping where we are going to end up and what our sense of privacy we will have. Like in a larger sense, we are already having difficulty in London. So if you walk around, you're going to be, you know, captured by so many cameras, and they are literally, you know, doing lots of analysis on you. They don't ask you any permissions. So that is literally, you know, the dystopian view would be, you could have a world of lemon market, so like, you know, literally everybody else other than you who has the ability to run a deep learning pipeline and get data on you, have better insights on you than you yourself.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you. So the almost the final word on this then to the queen of tech ecosystems herself, Marta. The question really, I decided to shape a question, which is how important will sustainability be to tech solutions of the future? Is it something that companies should be on it now? Do you predict that it could be massively impactful, or is it a red herring at the moment?
I think it is like maybe not in a year's time, but I think that if we talk about 5-year perspective, sustainability, or at least having a stand in sustainability, will be very important. The same way that we are seeing a massive change in the discussion or around how do companies, and even small companies, contribute to diversity, civility, inclusion, and all those beautiful things. Having a stand on what do you do to contribute to sustainability. From a marketing perspective, I would think that any startup should have something about sustainability in their pitch, of this is how we are contributing, or this is how we are not contributing to the opposite, or something of that sort. It's just a good selling point, among other things. I'm very critical when it comes to things like that.
No, that's so true. It is very practical, I have to say that. Well, actually, I'm just reading a message here sent to me by one of our cohort who said, let's hope that future generations look back at us with gratitude rather than sorrow for the stuff that we're building today. So thank you for that, Martin Walker. That was a great quote. I like that. I don't think I can add to that. So I'm probably going to say, Gigi, please save me. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Anish and Marta for joining us and sharing their time and expertise and their thoughts. Of course, to Daniel as well, who had a different hat on today. Thank you so much, Eric. We are at the end of this session, and we're leaving off with the music just as we came in. I just want to remind you that at 5:30 p.m. UK time, we have our final session, a fireside chat with Philip Van Kinnegem, who's the Managing Director of Strategic Innovation at Salesforce. And he's going to share his experience as a founder and as someone who built a company into a big corporation. So look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.